If anybody has a book, or if you have online access, we're going to be on page 13. We are in the introduction to Shara Bitochen still. And you may remember from Friday, I started introducing the idea of the alchemist, or at least that's what we're going to discuss. So let me read a little bit, and then we'll talk about it. A person who trusts in Hashem, his trust will bring him to turn his heart away from preoccupation with worldly matters and instead dedicate himself to matters of divine service. In terms of the tranquility of his soul, peace of mind, and lack of worry regarding worldly matters, he can be compared to an alchemist, which is a person who knows how to transform silver to gold and copper to iron or silver through his talents and efforts. Such a person, if it were possible, would have little worry regarding his livelihood. A person who has bitochen can be compared to someone whose livelihood is secure because he knows how to transform cheap materials into gold and silver, and therefore has little to worry about. In fact, the author will now establish a person who has bitochen is superior to the alchemist. So what we have over here, imagine if you were an alchemist. Your financial worries would be over, for sure. You would have no financial worries. You need money. You would just go and turn some silver into gold, sell the gold, and you're gold. You're golden. So obviously we don't have alchemists, but we do have counterfeiters. People who counterfeit, who produce money, which is not real money, but it's counterfeit money. And a counterfeit is a good modern stand-in for an alchemist. Because imagine if a person was a counterfeit artist, I think they call them artists, right? If you're a counterfeit artist and you needed to buy a new car, your car gave up the ghost, you need a new car, no problem. How much does a car cost? X $1,000. You go to your printing machine, you press print, X $1,000 comes out, you take the X $1,000, you go to your local car dealership, and you buy your car. You have no financial worries if you're a counterfeiter. And you have no financial worries if you're an alchemist, one would think. However, he's going to explain 10 differences between a person who has bitochen and an alchemist. 10 differences. Now, alchemists were not, it was illegal. And it was the worst crime that you could potentially commit in the Middle Ages, was to be an alchemist. The reason that it was considered such a bad crime to practice alchemy was that by practicing alchemy, you devalued the gold, right? Because remember, okay, so a little bit of economics. I have an MBA, by the way, so I can tell you, I think I can talk on this subject. So everything is supply and demand in modern economics. If you have 10 apples, if there are 10 apples in the world, and there are $10 in the world, and people want an apple, how much does each apple cost? $1. Now let's say there were $20 in the world, but still 10 apples. How much does each apple cost now? Huh? No? No? So again, you have $20 and you have 10 apples. So therefore, each apple now costs $2. Yeah. You for sure experience this. Have you heard of something called inflation? Do they have inflation over here in Australia? That's what's happening, right? So during COVID, the governments all over the world went wild, and they printed money. So governments are counterfeiters. They're thieves. They steal your money. They go into your bank account. You can have $1,000 in your bank account in 1990. And today, if you had that same $1,000 in your bank account, 45 years later, it would be worth a lot less. So in 1990, with that $1,000, you could fly to the States and back, right? Today, it's not even going to get you to Hawaii, right? Halfway, in one direction. That's inflation. So inflation happens because governments print more money. So there's now $20, 10 apples. Each apple is going to be worth $2. So your money, you need more of the money to buy the same thing that you could have bought pre-inflation, right? So since governments do it, it's legal. But when the population did it, when these counterfeiters did it, they devalued gold. So what you had is you had a king, and the power of the king comes from the fact that the king has his treasure, his treasury, his vaults, and in those vaults there's gold. And that wealth is a large part of the power of the king. So if you're going to devalue the gold, you're actually weakening the king. And that's why these alchemists were considered the worst crime. If a person was caught trying to practice alchemy, and remember I said they were counterfeits. They weren't really turning silver into gold. They just made the silver look like gold. But now there was more gold, fake and real to combine, there was more gold in the economy. Since there was more gold in the economy, your apples went up in price. And the gold that was sitting in the king's treasure chest went down in value, and so therefore in a way you were weakening the power of the king, and that's why it was considered one of the worst crimes that could be committed, because it was treasonous. It was a rebellion of the king. So he says that if you have bitachon, you're like a real alchemist, because you can always go to the printer, hit print, and the money comes out. The printer is tefillah, is davening, and Hashem sends the money to a person who has bitachon. There are many letters of the Rebbe where the Rebbe says that when you have bitachon, it opens the channels of blessing. It's like printing money, except it's legal and non-fattening as well. So,
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen.
that sounds familiar, voice. Moreover, he continues, a person who has bitachon is superior to an alchemist in 10 ways. Now, I did mention in our first shir together that the historical context of Chovis Halavavis and Shar Bitachon, and I mentioned that the author was a contemporary of Rashi, a Rishon, a contemporary of Rashi. And we know from how the Rebbe taught us to look at a Rashi, how every letter, every detail of a Rashi has meaning, and there's multiple layers of meaning. So I was starting to learn Shar Bitachon, and I came to this section, and we're going to learn that there's 10 differences between a Baal Bitachon, a person who has Bitachon, and an alchemist. And I'm going, okay, there are 10 differences, but why 10? And then I thought to myself, I know this number 10. I've heard it somewhere before. There are 10 spheres, right? In Seder Ishtalshelus, in the progression of how Hashem created the world, He created the world using 10 spheroids, 10 steps, and this is 10 differences. So I thought, I wonder if there's any alignment. I wonder if we could line up the 10 spheroids with the 10 differences between the person who has bitachon and the alchemist. And it seems to me that it fits. Now, this is entirely my boichsvaris. It's entirely my my thoughts, and could be that I'm right, could be that I'm wrong. You don't have to agree with this. However, the Rebbe said on a number of occasions that when one learns Tanya, Hasidim were always very careful when you learn Tanya not to inject various explanations of the Tanya. You let the Tanya speak for itself. The Tanya, the words of the Alter Rebbe are very exact, they're very precise, and anything that a person like me is going to add to the Tanya is just going to detract. It's not going to be a real addition. But the Rebbe said, quoted one of the other Rebbeim, I forget which one of the other Rebbeim, that if it increases a person's Yira Shamayim, then you're allowed to give explanations to the Tanya. So I think if it increases our understanding of Bitachon and the Esesvirus, it's not an exercise in futility, but again, please don't feel obligated to accept pretty much anything I say, and certainly this now it is entirely my own thinking. So let's look at the first difference between an alchemist and a Baal Bitachon, person has Bitachon. First of all, he says, the alchemist needs specific materials for his work and cannot complete it without them. So he needs materials. There's different types of materials. He needs raw materials. So you do need silver. You cannot start with nothing. You have to start with silver, and you can turn the silver, you can convert it into gold. Whereas the person who trusts in Hashem has his sustenance guaranteed from any means available in the world. Any raw materials, any tools, anything. The Baal Bitachon needs a specific set of tools. If you're a counterfeit person, you need a printer that can print high quality, that can make counterfeit bills that look exactly like the original bills. Otherwise, you won't be a very successful counterfeiter. So, as the verse says regarding the manna that the Jews ate in the desert, the man, so that he would make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but whatever comes from the mouth of Hashem does man live. So that's the first difference. The first difference is that you need to have the first difference is that if you're an alchemist, you need to I'm getting distracted. If you are an alchemist, you need a starting point. You need raw material, and they may not always be available. So alchemy is not such a sure thing, you know. It could be that the alchemist cannot find his raw materials or his tools, the printer that prints it or the paper that you need to print it. But the Baal Bitachon, Hashem will find a way, and there's so many infinite ways, almost infinite ways, of how Hashem could get you what you need, that you don't need to have this. Okay, so that's the first thing. I think that corresponds to the first of the Svirus, which is Keser. So Keser, in reality there's two ways to count Svirus. Sometimes Keser is considered as part of the 10 Svirus, and sometimes, and then there's no Das, one of the Svirus is excluded, because he always has to be 10. Sometimes it starts with Chochmah, so it doesn't start with Keser. Keser is viewed as external to the 10 Svirus, and then Das is included. But I'm going to go with Keser as being, with that model, with that system, where Keser is the start. So let's start with Keser. What is Keser? So Keser is really a fascinating, of the Svirus, it's a very unique, all the Svirus are unique, but Keser has some interesting properties. The first property that Keser has is it's the least defined of all of the Svirus. So we can speak about the other 9 Svirus, and we can have an intelligent conversation. Not that we understand what we're talking about, even if we're speaking about it. You know, it's like, I often say, if I would describe my bedroom in Toronto to you, like I would describe, so nobody's seen my bedroom, I could describe it, and if I have a good vocabulary and, you know, we speak the same language, I could give you a really good picture. I could paint, not paint, but with my words, I could paint a picture where you would have a good idea. I could say so many meters from the bed to the sideboard stand, whatever. We can talk, we can describe it, and you can have a pretty good, you know, the color of the walls, what type of floor it is. I could describe all these things, and you could have a decent picture, understanding. You can imagine what my room looks like. But no matter how much I try and describe it to you, you don't know what the room actually looks like. If you would walk in within a few seconds, you would understand the room in its entirety. What would take me years of trying to explain it to you, and you'll never understand it with the same clarity as if you actually were present and you saw it. So you don't, no matter how clear I try and make it, in my head it's absolutely defined and I know what it is. In your head it's going to be more vague and not necessarily accurate. So when we speak about spheres, we don't really know what we're talking about. But I don't know what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm repeating words, but it's like somebody's describing their bedroom to me and I'm describing it to you. It's not the thing itself. It says, you know, when you hear something, when somebody describes something to you, and when you see it, you cannot compare seeing something, witnessing something, and hearing about it afterwards. So, Keser, so that's true of all of the spheres. So let's talk about Keser, as if I know what I'm talking about, which I have established I do not. But Keser actually is the most difficult to even define on this level because it has no definition. That's the whole point of Keser. The minute you define it, it's not really it anymore. There's certain things we can say about it. There's an internal part of Keser. There's an external part of Keser. We can say that Keser is a memutza. It's an intermediary. It's like a translator. It takes somebody speaks in Lashon HaKodesh in Hebrew, and somebody only understands English, and you want to translate from the Hebrew to the English, or English to Strayan, or any language, doesn't matter. And then, so the person in the middle has to understand both English and Strayan in order to be able to translate. So he has both, and that's Keser. Keser takes things from the source of everything, which transcends any definition, and it brings it into a starting point where you can already start to define it a little bit, at least using language to define it. So therefore, Keser is the foundational material, if you will, to say it in a very crude way. Keser is the foundational material from which all of creation flows. And so it's interesting that the first difference between the alchemist and the Bala B'tochen is that the alchemist doesn't have access to these general materials. He needs very specific materials, and if he doesn't have that, he cannot practice his craft. While the Bala B'tochen can access Keser, and if you access in Keser, you can have it can manifest as anything and everything, and it does. So therefore, the Bala B'tochen is not worried because he can just manifest some part of Keser into whatever his needs are, and Hashem will assist him with that. Okay, let's look at the next one. Sorry, there's one very interesting part. He says, for no means, I'm on page 15, of providing sustenance is lacking from God at any time or in any place. as you know from the story of Elijah, Eliyahu, with the ravens and with the widow, and from how God sustained him with the cold-baked cake and a flask of water. So these are all incidents that happened with Eliyahu Navi, with Elijah. And Eliyahu is, so I'll just take one of them, which is really fascinating. And that's what he refers to as Elijah with the ravens. What's Elijah with the ravens? So Eliyahu spoke truth to power, right? He stood up to Achav, the king. Achav was a tyrannical, avodah zarah king, and he stood up to Achav. Like he spoke to Achav, and he told him what he needed to tell him, which Achav wasn't so happy about that, and his wife actually was even more unhappy. It's like Jill Biden. If you insult Biden, so then she gets upset. So this is what happened. Achav's wife got upset, and they wanted to kill Eliyahu, so he ran into the desert. And here's the great irony of the story, it's so geschmack. There were ravens. Ravens went to the kitchen of Achav, right? And the ravens flew into the kitchen of Achav, and they picked meat, delicious, meats and foods, and they brought it to Eliyahu in the desert, and they dropped Achav's own food in there. So they wanted to destroy Eliyahu. They wanted to kill him. And what did Hashem do? Because the Bala Bitochen is always taken care of. The very source that wanted to kill Eliyahu ends up being what sustains and supports him in this miraculous way in the desert. So what Rabbeinu Bachya is telling us over here is that if you are a Bala Bitochen, even if you don't have a kitchen, even if you don't have the raw materials, you're sitting in the middle of a desert, don't worry. Hashem will figure a way to sustain, support the Bala Bitochen. And he gives some other examples. The second, I'm now on page 16, the second manner in which a person who has Bitochen is superior to an alchemist is the alchemist needs to perform certain actions and procedures in order to produce the silver and gold, and cannot reach his goal without them. Additionally, it's possible that the fumes and the smoke that he inhales will cause him to die as a result of his working consistently and spending large amounts of time toiling with them day and night. Conversely, a person who relies on God is secure from any mishaps in the present and also feels secure that no bad will happen to him in the future. This is because he believes that everything that happens to him is from God, and he will therefore be a cause of joy and happiness. His sustenance will come to him in a restful, calm, and peaceful manner. All right, so here we speak about the sphere of Chokhmah. So let me tell you a little bit about Chokhmah, and then you'll see how I want to align them. Chokhmah is, there's two things about Chokhmah. So I like to think of Chokhmah as the starving artist. I don't know if what's the starving artist? So there are a lot of people in this world who are very artistic, they're very talented, they can create beautiful masterpieces of art or music, but they don't make a lot of money. They pass away destitute. Why? Because artistic people are right-brained people. They're very in touch with their intuition, with their creativity, with all those things that make an artist an artist. And so it's all right brain. Then you have something called an accountant. What's an accountant? An accountant is left-brained. They say that accountants don't have a sense of humor. Why? Because humor is right-brained. You have to really think Humor is about thinking, putting things together that don't really belong together, things that shock you, surprise you. That's humor. We laugh when something doesn't seem shocking. So accountants are very square. They're very, of course, by the way, let me just say, before you throw anything at me, I have a friend who told me that, did they throw any rotten eggs at you? So I said, not yet. So he said, that's because eggs are very expensive these days in Australia. they've gone very, very high in price. So, okay, so please hold your eggs before you throw them at me. There are accountants that I actually know that have the greatest sense of humor that you could ever imagine. And there are artists that make a lot of money and are very competent business people. For sure, I am generalizing. And all generalizations are false. You know that, right? So I'm generalizing. But the point I want to make is that there's some people like the absent-minded professors. They're very creative. But they're not, in this world. They're not realistic and effective in certain ways. And then you've got your accountants, kind of people that are very, very focused on balancing the book, and it's a precise thing. There's no, you're out by a penny, you're out. And they bring, they're able to bring it together. So the Zohar actually says that Chochmah and the next Sfira, Bina, are two beloved friends that never depart. So Bina is the accountant. We're going to get to the accountant soon. But Chochmah is the artist, the starving artist, where you can have, because there's no discipline, there's no framework that surrounds Chochmah, it could lead to lack, and a person could be inspired about something. They could have an inspiration. That comes from Chochmah. When you have an inspiration, like, whoa, wait, I have this idea, whatever, but then it's fleeting. It can disappear. And the reason it can disappear is because it has nothing tangible. It's nothing empirical to hold on to and to grab onto and to be defined. So what he's saying over here, so I'll tell you another interesting question that in Chabad Hasidus they asked this question. So I had mentioned in one of our previous sessions that the world is perpetually created, right? The doctrine of perpetual creation. So the doctrine of perpetual creation says that the world is created every single instant, again and again and again it's created. So my question is then, why does the world look exactly the same all the time, every time it's recreated? If every moment the world is recreated, what makes it exactly the same? It's true that Hashem could make changes. He could make changes. There's a fascinating sikha where the Rebbe explains that by the Yam Suf, based on Midrashim, the Rebbe says that if the Yam Suf wouldn't have split to allow the people through, Hashem would have made the Yam Suf just disappear retroactively. Means they would never, every map, you look at a map that's from 10 years ago, there would be suddenly which has the Yam Suf now. If the Yam Suf wouldn't have split, that map would the Yam Suf would disappear on that map. Every memory that every human being has of there being a body of water in this place would have just disappeared in totality. So, yeah, it's true. Since Hashem is recreating the world every instant, it could change. But it doesn't. By and large, it doesn't. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to accomplish anything. Let's say you're preparing for a test. You're learning some Torah and you're preparing for a test in school. If the text that you're learning would keep changing, you would never be able to learn that information, and you would never be able to to take the test. You would never be able to raise a family. You would never be able to build a house. You would never be able to do anything that human beings do and accomplish, because it would be a moving target. Everything would continuously change. So how does it stay the same? So in Chassidus it explains Chochmah. Because Chochmah is the very beginning of the creative process, it has a quality of being both undefined, creative, and somewhat defined. Okay, so now with that introduction, I think we can understand the person who who is the alchemist can easily get lost. There's a danger in being too creative and too undisciplined. And the alchemist is undisciplined. He's looking for a shortcut to get to wealth. And the Baal Bitochen doesn't suffer from that. So since Chokhmah has kind of both of these qualities, it has the general creative quality and the specific defined quality. So therefore, the Baal Bitochen grabs onto the positive, healthy part of Chokhmah, and the person who is the alchemist grabs onto the other. The third manner in which a person who has Bitochen is superior to the alchemist, says Rabbeinu Bachya, the alchemist is secretive towards others out of concern for himself. Due to his fear, he is unable to confide in others and receive the necessary advice in order to be successful. Conversely, a person who trusts in Hashem is not afraid of telling anyone about his trust. On the contrary, boasts about it. As King David of blessed memory said, I trust in Hashem, I will not fear. What can man do to me? So remember I said that the alchemist is committing high treason because the alchemist is devaluing the currency, and therefore you don't go around, if a person's a counterfeit artist, you don't go around telling everybody what you do for a living. You make a story or something, because if you go and tell people what you do for a living, since it's illegal, they're going to have you imprisoned. So the next sphere is called Bina. And Bina, the purpose of Bina is to define things. It's the accountant, right? It's to define things, to explain things. So that initial inspiration that you have with Chokhmah, which is fleeting. Like let's say you're trying to solve a math problem. And you're working on trying to solve the math, or you're trying to understand Lahavdil, you're trying to understand the Tosfos. And you're working so hard to understand the Tosfos, and you're like, wow, you're breaking your head trying to understand the Tosfos. And then all of a sudden, there's like a moment where you go like, in the cartoon it would be the light bulb going on top of you see the light bulb on top of the head. You're like, I think I've got it, but you don't really have it, it's like it's fleeting. I'll give you an example of this, which will, I think, clarify it. Let's say we were in the 1950s, a person in the 1950s. Now let me tell you, I've seen magazines from the 1950s, and they have advertisements. And the advertisements say that 4 out of 5 doctors recommend palm olive, a cigarette, a certain cigarette. 4 out of 5 doctors in the 1950s, before the Surgeon General, I think in 1952 or 1954, said that smoking was bad for your health. Doctors actually thought that smoking was beneficial for a person's health, and cigarette companies advertised their cigarettes based on 4 out of 5 doctors say that this is a superior cigarette for your health. Okay. So imagine this guy goes to his doctor in the 1950s, and he's sitting down there with his doctor. He gets a full checkup. He's got this chronic cough, and he keeps coughing and coughing. So he goes to his doctor for his annual checkup. The doctor looks at him, everything. They sit down. The doctor offers him a cigarette, takes one himself. They light a cigarette, and they start smoking. And the guy smokes, and he smokes and he coughs. The doctor goes, smoke, cough. Smoke, cough. This is Chokhmah. Something's there. Nah. Could it be? Nah. Anyway. And it's out. Do you know how many thoughts a person has every day? I think it's around 55,000 thoughts. That means Chokhmah is firing 55,000 ideas into your head every single day. Right? So you're not going to pay attention to most of them. And the patient leaves, okay. Next patient comes in, same story. Does the physical, he's got a chronic cough. They sit down, they're smoking, relaxed after the thing, and the guy coughs again, and Chokhmah jumps up again. Right. So then, when that patient leaves, he calls in his secretary, and he says, go through the filing cabinet, pull out anybody who is complaining of a chronic cough, And let's see how many of those are smokers. Now what's he doing? He's taking the chachma and he's bringing it down into bina. Bina comes from the Hebrew word boineh, which means to build. You're building a framework, a structure, an intellectual framework, a structure, where we're starting to be that accountant. We're starting to, like, smoking, coughing, is there a connection? And then maybe this doctor's like really intrigued, so he does a study, and he recruits, 1,000 people. 500 of them smoke, 500 don't. And he looks at statistically which ones have chronic coughs. And guess what? The smokers are more likely to have a chronic cough. Oh my goodness. So he does a bigger study. And the more he's studying and the more he's looking into it, the more he is confirming through bina, through the process of bina, through categorizing things and counting things, he's confirming that there is a correlation between smoking and coughing. Okay. So now, I'll just throw in one other thing. Does he stop smoking himself? Why not?
He doesn't have a cough.
No, he has a cough, let's say. Das, right. So we're leaving out das in this thing, but yeah, he would leave out das. He's missing das. Das will connect the theory to the practicality. Okay, so back to bina. So we have bina. And bina is secretive versus defined, out there and defined. So in chachma bina, chachma is so fleeting that it has no existence. Nobody knows about it. What's happening in your chachma at the moment, nobody knows what's happening in your chachma. Truth is, nobody knows what's happening in your bina, but at least you start knowing it when you have it in your bina. Bina starts translating that inspiration, that first inspiration, into something defined. And so therefore, it's the secretive versus the defined, the out there. I have something substantial, I'm not going to lose it. Yeah?
You might want to answer this after, but I didn't see how 2 was chachma. Because it's all about his heart.
No, chachma chachma can lead you astray. It's very, because it's not so well defined, it can lead you astray. That's the artist who can't hold a job, and he can't hold a marriage, and he can't make money because he's too in the clouds. Too in the clouds. Literally in the clouds. So that's the problem with the alchemist. He's in the clouds, and the clouds are toxic. They're killing him. All right, next. The fourth, some of them fit better, you'll see. Some of them fit really well. The fourth manner in which a person who has bitachon is prepared to alchemist, listen to this. The alchemist must either prepare an abundance of gold and silver for a time when he will need it, or prepare just the right amount for the interim. If he prepares a lot, so he's constantly anxious. So you see, the alchemist, how much money does he print in one sitting? When he hits print, how much, he has to set the dial. So how much gold should he create in one sitting? Should he create enough gold to be on the level of Elon Musk? Or should he create enough gold to get through the week, and then he'll do it again next week? So listen to what he says. If he prepares a lot, if he becomes Elon Musk, he will constantly be afraid that he will somehow lose the silver or gold that he has already produced. Now, we all have heard of Elon Musk and other very extremely wealthy people. If this guy starts putting his... We know how Elon Musk earned his money. We can trace it. This guy is going to get in trouble. So first of all, he may lose his money. Second of all, he'll not be able to feel calm or relaxed due to the fear of the king, who might take it away from him, and due to fear of the people who might steal it from him. The Mishnah says, the more possession, the more assets we have, the more anxiety we have. If, on the other hand, so that's an argument that he shouldn't create too much. He shouldn't press print and print too much money. On the other hand, if he only prepares enough gold and silver to last for a short amount of time, a situation might arise whereby he will not be able to produce more silver and gold due to the lack of the necessary materials at a time when he'll be in great need. Right? So he needs to He needs to pay the ATO, and he doesn't have enough silver to turn into gold. So he says in a note over here, in both of the above scenarios, the alchemist is worried that he might be left penniless. Either he's afraid that whatever silver or gold he will amass will be seized or stolen from him, or he's afraid that he'll be potentially left with nothing as a result of inability to produce more. Now, contrast that to the Baal Bitachon. The person who trusts in God strongly trusts that God will sustain him as he wishes, at the time he wishes, as the person wishes, the time he wishes, and in the place that he wishes, just as he sustains a fetus in its mother's womb and a chick inside the egg. By the way, a fetus in its mother's womb, I can understand. The mother eats, and the food goes to the baby, and goes through the umbilical cord and ends up with the baby. But he says not only the mother's womb, a fetus in its mother's womb, a chick inside the egg. That's a bigger miracle, because there's nothing that can come from outside the egg. If the shell cracks, the chick dies. So even though it's a hermetically concealed entity, still the Hashem sustains the chick inside there, neither of which is an opening through which food can enter to sustain it. God provides each with sustenance, even though there seems to be no natural source. Similarly, God provides sustenance for the bird in the air, the fish in the water, both of which lack readily accessible food, and he provides for the ant and the worm despite their frailty. And then he brings our young lions back, which we spoke about before. So this is the fourth thing. The fourth problem that the alchemist has is a problem of abundant quantity. Does he print enough money to sustain him for the rest of his life so he doesn't have to do the process again, or does he not? He doesn't know how much to do. And the Baal Bitachon, the person who has Bitachon, has no fear, because he knows that he lives in a world, we're going to speak about it this afternoon, a world that Hashem created. And Hashem is Teva Tov Lehetiv. Hashem is the definition of good. And Hashem wants to do good. The default setting in the world, we're going to speak about it this afternoon, the default setting is for blessing to gush, to flow into this world in abundance. Now, the next sphera is Chesed. What's Chesed? This is Chesed. Chesed is abundance. Chesed is about having no lack. I think that one I don't even have to elaborate. It lines up beautifully. Number 5. The fifth manner in which a person who has bitachon is superior to the alchemist. The alchemist is in a constant state of fear and dread due to his occupation. He's afraid of all people. From the most important man in the nation, the king, down to the least important who could rat him out to the king, he is afraid of people. He lives in constant fear of people. However, the person who trusts in Hashem is held in awe by other people. Now, he doesn't fear other people. Other people hold him in awe. They say this person's bitachon is so awe-inspiring. Even if those people are great and respectable, they give him respect. Even the animals and stones will seek to do this person's will and will cause him no harm. As it says in Tehillim, he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High, from the beginning of the psalm till the end, it's all full of how bitachon saves a person. Okay. So the next of the spheres is Gvura. Gvura is connected with Yira, with fear. And this whole thing is about fear. You see, either the alchemist is afraid that he's going to be discovered by the government, for his illegal activities are going to be discovered, or the fear and awe and respect that the world has for the person who is a Baal Bitachon. So you see that lines up beautifully. The sixth manner in which a person who has Bitachon is superior to the alchemist is not protected from sickness and disease, which disturb his contentment with his wealth and prevent him from deriving benefit from his possessions. Similarly, they stop the alchemist from enjoying the wealth that he has amassed as a result of his toil. So he has wealth, but he's in a hospital bed. How is he going to enjoy the wealth from his hospital bed? There's no enjoyment. He can buy the most delicious foods, but he can't eat those foods. He can afford the greatest vacation, first-class vacation, but he doesn't have the physical health to go on that vacation. So it's talking about sickness. And then, of course, the Baal Bitachon, conversely, the person who trusts in God, is protected from disease and sickness, except for disease and sickness that he's subject to as a means of atonement or to increase his reward in the next world. Okay, so there's sometimes even a Baal Bitachon could not be well, but it's for the Baal Bitachon's own benefit. We're going to discuss that in more length, and we did discuss it on Thursday, when we spoke about embracing suffering, the E. But you see that the sixth thing is all about healing, sickness and healing, and the next sphere is Tiferes, and it's brought down in many places in the Zohar and quoted in Chassidus in a number of places that Tzemach Tzedek quotes it, that healing is connected with Tiferes, because sickness, illness, is essentially, if you distill illness down to its core, it's an imbalance of some sort in the body. So when the body is not in balance, then there's sickness. And Tiferes is about balance. The whole thing of Tiferes is it balances Chesed and Gevura. It balances it out, and therefore Tiferes is connected with healing, and the Baal Bitachon has the healing that he needs. Number 7, the seventh manner in which a person who has Bitachon is superior to the alchemist. There's a possibility that the alchemist will not be able to use his gold and silver to obtain his food, because food may not be accessible in his city at certain times. So he may have all the money in the world, but he cannot buy food with it, so he starves. Conversely, a person who trusts in Hashem will not lack any food at any time or place until the end of his days. Okay? So it's about being able to convert the money into food. That's what the seventh is. There is no guarantee that the alchemist will be able to successfully have success in purchasing food, while the Baal Bitachon has absolute success in, he will always be able to be successful in procuring his or her sustenance. The next, and the sphere that corresponds to is Netzach. Netzach means victory. And the quality of Netzach is exactly this. It's the ability to take Chesed and Gvura and Tiferes, all that came before, and have a real positive impact on the world. Just like a person who conquers an enemy, if you want to conquer the world, be victorious in the world, you need to be able to take the Chesed and the energies of Chesed and the energy of Gvura and the energy of Tiferes, and before that of Keser and Chochmah and Bina, take all these energies and apply these energies to actually overcoming challenges. And that is, so the challenge here is, what am I going to eat? And you can overcome that challenge if you have bitachon. Then Hashem will help you overcome those challenges and achieve success. But if the person is an alchemist, he's trying to take that shortcut, he is not going to achieve success. So we will continue with the 8th manner, and how that corresponds to the Sphira of Hod. Please God, tomorrow, same station, same time.